Hey everybody, welcome to the LineStar YouTube channel. Alongside Tyler Wiemann, I'm Shannon Sommerville, and we've got a nice tutorial video for you on the PropsAI tool specifically for NBA season, and we've got a ton of tips. We're gonna dive into kind of our process before we pick props every single day for our NBA picks show, and we wanted to share with you guys our insights and maybe any helpful tips so you can maximize your experience on the LineStar app using the PropsAI tool. So Tyler, let's do it. Ready to give some helpful tips?
Let's dive in.
All right, so pulling up the LineStar app. Again, linestarapp.com is where you can find this. This is the initial page, but we're going to click on props. It'll take us into the LineStar app for today. And we've only got 3 games on the NBA slate for today. So first, Tyler, talk me through your process. Where do you start when you go ahead and research NBA props for the day? We both kind of have different processes, but I think generally speaking, it's kind of like the same stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I look and target whatever books I'm trying to place bets on.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I am in Oregon. The only sports book I can play on besides, Underdog or PrizePicks is DraftKings. So I always click the DraftKings one. And then what I like to do go first is sort by the alert score. So what the alert score is an algo with our projections to try and find profitability. So what you're going to see a lot on these is you're going to see some plus money props that LineStar likes. So I always think that's a very interesting spot to start on a sport book. The whole reason is the odds just mean so much. I know most people look at it and it's just like, oh, I just wanted to go over under, but you have to understand that your profitability is big time based on what the odds are. So
yeah. And you mentioned the odds, of course, being on DraftKings, which is generic sports books where the odds determine your payout. It's obviously a different way of using the odds here on this particular PropsAI tool than it is on Underdog Fantasy, where if you are on Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks, on their sites, what you have to do is do 2 or more picks together. So in that instance, the odds don't determine the payout on Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks. It stays the same regardless of what the odds are. So if you're using Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks, you would just use it a little bit differently. I think that's probably something worth noting here while we're talking about it. I'll unclick the DraftKings and pull it up. Sometimes what we like to do is just to see, what are the best odds. Again, if you don't understand the odds, we have a separate video just breaking down in the simplest of terms what the odds are, and I'll link that below here. But basically speaking, we can just pull it up and see kind of what the best odds are on the day. So even though this might not be great value for you, Tyler, on DraftKings where you play, it might be good value on Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks, right?
absolutely. One of the things to kind of take from this is we're seeing a lot of 140s, 145. An odd of minus 140 is the books saying there's a 59% chance of it going over. So when you're, betting with Underdog or PrizePicks, can use those into your advantage a little bit.
Absolutely. So we'll go back to your book though, Tyler, and you start with the alert score, which is good. For me, Tyler, what I like to do is something actually you taught me, was just, hey, first things first. You got to check who's in and who's out of the games in this one. And you can do that simply by going to the starting lineup and see who's in and who's out, because as we've both, discovered throughout doing the show and our own betting experience, like you can find a lot of great value. Even though we don't want people to be injured, there is some leverage that comes with that as well in the sports book. So an important place to start. And again, something like I've picked up on as a newer prop bettor over the past couple of years is like, that's the number one thing. It's so simple, but it's worth mentioning, I think, in this video for those purposes. Any thoughts on that?
And something else to you with that is once you figure out who's in, who's out, you can use the usage matrix to kind of dig in a lot.
All right, so the usage matrix, really quickly going over this. Tyler's gone over it in more detail on the LineStar tutorials, but right now we have Portland selected as the team here, and we have selected for tonight Brogdon and Shaden Sharp are both off. So if we click Get Results, we can see how certain players being off impacts the stat lines of a lot of these guys. So it's super helpful information that you can then take a look at the prop market, and you see things in a much different way when you know someone's getting a huge usage bump, right, Tyler?
Yeah, and there's a couple things that we really need to take notice of when using the usage matrix. One, total minutes. So that's going to be the sample size the guy has with that. Like you look at Scoot Henderson, 436 minutes, totally fine using that kind of sample size. But you go down to the bottom and, there's Banton at 36 minutes. Like that's just way too small of a sample size to use too much of that info. So understand that before you dive too much into a prop. And that's also why we've only marked Brogdon and Sharp off. We haven't marked everybody else off. Brogdon and Sharp are the ones that are going to have more of the usage, and I just didn't want to limit that sample size too much.
Right. So taking note of this from the props department, I know Anthony Simons was a guy that you were looking at various props of his. A lot of times in the LineStar app, I saw DeAndre Ayton was kind of popping, which we'll go back, I guess, to the PropsAI tool from there, and we can kind of even just pull up the team. So with these tabs, of course, you can go in specifically. So we have the sportsbook selected, but we can also get even more specific by selecting the team that we want. We've looked up the injury report for Portland and seen the usage matrix there. So let's, see what LineStar is saying in the PropsAI tool. So you can see, a lot of green there, Tyler.
Yeah, there's a lot of
how do you
places
evaluate
to attack on Portland, and partially just because people won't want to attack with Portland. They're 10-point underdogs, but what that means is they're going to have to score if they stay into this game. So I think it is an interesting place to attack on this slate.
And it's something that you just mentioned there is, take note of the other things that the LineStar app has to offer, which is that top tab where you can see the game total and the point spread. You can glean a lot of information just by those two things alone. For example, game total can tell you, how high scoring a game is, which sounds simple, but great for props. Understanding that if it's a low scoring game, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the prop market. You could look to some unders, or even for rebounds prop. That's actually something that I look at a lot, because it means if it's a low game total, a lot of missed shots, right? So rebound opportunities galore. So I think LineStar has a lot of different tools, and just another way to take note of that. I'm glad you mentioned that. But again, with the PropsAI tool, you can go in specifically by category. If you know that a certain player has a really great matchup from, let's say, the perimeter. They're the great three-point shooter going up against maybe the Milwaukee Bucks, who lately have been struggling against threes or something like that. You can look specifically for that as well. How else would you, I guess, use the tool to your advantage, Tyler?
Yeah, so leaning into certain props, I think, is a good strategy as a whole. Like, there are so many different things you can bet on for every single sport. I think narrowing your scope a little bit does help picking profitable things instead of just picking whatever. What I tend to happen is I start understanding teams a little bit more, maybe just little nuances that I wouldn't have if I was betting everything, So I like to keep it smaller: rebounds, assists, points, maybe sometimes threes. But I don't get too crazy with it, and I kind of dig into those instead of looking at everything. If there's a player where I really like his rebounds, totally. And it goes the same with baseball. Like I look at pitchers a lot, and that's part of the reason. Every day there's 10, 20 pitchers to go over. instead of,
Yeah.
like 900 batters or
Yeah, it's
90
definitely a
batters or
good
whatever it is.
strategy to zero in on a particular stat category, especially since the
Mhm.
knowledge you accumulate doing these you can just
Yes.
remember, oh, the other day I took this prop and that hit against this team in this situation, and it just kind of becomes cumulative at that point where you recall it. But on the PropsAI tool, narrowing down is definitely a great betting strategy from that standpoint. I'm just going to quickly go over all the different, of course, this will just sort it by the player, but you can also type in the player's name here. If we're just looking for Anthony Simons, you can type his name in there just to kind of narrow it down a little bit more. Also, the chat feature is something that I know I popped in and out of there, and sometimes the LineStar community has some really great insight that they mentioned there. LineStar is an awesome community that's super supportive of each other. We're all trying to beat the books, right? So you can always pop in the chat. And if you have an insight as well, just drop it in there and help everybody out. Last 10, essentially results of the last 5 games, last 10 games over the course of the season. The implied points, Tyler, something I know that you use a lot, especially with pace of the game and whatnot. Is that something that you look to at all?
I don't look at it too much, but I absolutely glance at it. I'm looking at it more as far as the game total as a whole,
Sure. Yeah.
just to understand pace, but it is definitely helpful. And I would say it's more helpful in some other sports than basketball.
So this would be just the sportsbook line. You can sort by LineStar's pick. Consensus is basically the consensus among the community, so industry leaders across the board, and the overall average of that. So that's what that is.
Yeah. And you can sort by their difference, which
Yeah.
is another thing I will do from time to time.
Yeah. Always fine. And then you use the alert score, which we've gone over the edge percentage, something that I've used a lot, especially during football season. You're trying to find the best edge in the prop market. Basically, it compares LineStar's projection to the lines out there in whatever sportsbook you're looking at, and it'll show you the ones that are most impactful there and varied in terms of LineStar's pick there versus the line. So it can be a helpful tool. You can learn some information and be like, hey, why is this so different than what the line is? And maybe do a little bit of research, find out exactly why. And so you can also use that to your advantage. And the edge difference is kind of the same thing there, comparing, finding the props with the largest LineStar projection difference to that over-under line. And last column is, go ahead.
Oh, the difference is just going to be like the numerical difference, whereas the edge percentage is the percentage difference.
Right. So, if it's points and the line is 25.5 and LineStar's is higher, that's the difference right there. Opponent versus the stat. This is a good category. And one of the more recent additions to the PropsAI tool, which is super helpful, just seeing how other people in that, or players in that position, have done versus that team, and if you can have a good stat category. Anything to add there?
The only thing with the opponent stat category is you could also click on the player's name, and you can get kind of more in-depth stats on that player in that matchup. So a lot of different ways on this page to see some different stats.
Yeah, if you click again on the little arrow on Jeremy Grant we did there and popped it down, you could see a little bit more detail, or by what Tyler said was click on the name and it pulls up the player card. You could look more into depth, see the alert score. So not only is this for PropsAI, but also for people that are playing daily fantasy, and you can really dive into some in-depth research there, as you can see. So a lot of different ways for you to research your props there. And one tool that we haven't used that's for daily fantasy, but also PropsAI, is the matchups tool. I'll pull that up quickly. And what has been awesome this season with this tool has been the ability for us to go in and see who has the best matchup, not just for fantasy points, but if you click on a certain player, it'll pop down and have the stat line of players that play that same position and how they've done versus that specific team, which has been so helpful. So we could just say, oh, this person's gone over a certain rebounding line, or all these have gone under, and just see where teams have given up certain certain stats to. How do you use the matchup tool to your advantage, Tyler?
Yeah, that's exactly it. If I'm, looking at centers and looking at rebounds, I will pull down the little drop down just to see what everybody else has done in the short term and long term. And with this, we have an updated matchup tool that is coming out, today, that will even go a little bit further into that as far as rolling averages and whatnot, which will be really nice for everybody to use. And
So
we will have a tutorial on that when it's out too.
absolutely. So tons of things. Have we mentioned everything here? Probably not. But one thing I also like to do sometimes is just to I'm just curious sometimes what other people are thinking as well. And it has here over odds. So if you like a certain player or a certain prop, you can just click on it. It will go into what I describe this as kind of like a little shopping cart for yourself for props. And then you can, it'll pop up over here in your My Picks, so that if you have a couple that you're looking at that you want to just kind of bookmark for yourself, that's a way to do it there too. I thought that was kind of a neat thing. And it also counts it as somebody who in the LineStar community that likes it. So you could see it pops up, it kind of populates, and you can see if other LineStar community members are also with you on that as well. So just another neat little tool there. Hope you guys can use that.
Yeah, and if you go where it says edge difference is the drop down, if you up a little bit.
Yep, here.
Yeah, click there. You can actually hit most picks, which will bring up the ones that, the community likes the most or least. And so you can bet that way.
Very good. Yeah, again, this is another way to sort. Just a lot of tools to your advantage. My recommendation is to just kind of play around with it and find what works for you. What works for Tyler and I might not be a good process for you. So you got to figure out what works. And that's one of the great things about the LineStar app is there's so many different ways to use it and ways to kind of do research and find a method or I guess some kind of system for yourself to have success in the prop betting market, right?
Yeah, I really like what you said about your My Picks being kind of a shopping cart, and that's really how I go through it. When I start looking through props, I will pick out 10, 15, 20, however many I like on that day, and then I don't bet them right away. We'll start doing a little bit of research on every one of them, seeing if there's other things that I can find that back up projection or whatnot. And then that's when I bet it. So it is a multi-step process, not just a one click and go. But the projections are there to help you, streamline that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not a perfect science. LineStar, sometimes we go against it on our show, the projections themselves. But, it's a great tool to give you more information at your fingertips and just place smarter, well-informed bets when you're out there in the prop market, because it can get really wild. And we love the shopping cart too. Anytime it feels like you're on Amazon, right? Amazon.com. Tyler, you know about that?
I think everybody knows about Amazon.com.
Well, if you guys have any questions about how else to use the PropsAI tool, or if we've missed anything, if you have any other questions, please drop them in the comments. We are here to help you guys. We want you guys to have the best experience using the LineStar app. So if there's something that's confusing that you don't understand, or if you have suggestions on how we can make the app better, please drop them in the comments. Let us know. We want to hear from you guys. And good luck out there in the prop market. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the LineStar YouTube channel so you can be caught up with our daily picks that come out every single day. Yesterday we went 3 for 3 and we got to set off the money gun, so hopefully more winning picks are in the works. And now that you guys know how we do it, you can go do it out there as well. So if you don't like our picks one day, you can go to the PropsAI tool in the LineStar app, fire it up, and go ahead and make your own picks. Good luck out there in the prop market, guys. We'll see you guys next time. And again, any questions, drop them below. We're here to help you. See you next time.